this a little smoother is if you put the links in the chat.
Okay.
And I'll open up the actual presentation.
Okay.
So good morning, everyone. It's 10 o'clock, so we are still doing some setup. So just give us a few more minutes, and in about 5 minutes at the latest, we start the presentation. So we'll be back in a few minutes. So just please hang in there for a few more minutes. Thank you for joining on time, and we'll be starting the presentation about 4 minutes or so.
Okay.
We can do it here. Go, Judah. Come here. Come here. Go. Go. Go to your spot.
Okay, good morning again. We're going to get the ball rolling in a second or so. My name is Francisco Guzman. I'm the Director for Small Business Services for Harlem Community Development Corporation. In charge of putting together this type of event, among other things. Thank you for joining. Thank you for being on time. Many of you are already there, and I know quite a few are still coming. Those latecomers never fail. So thank you for being on time. We respect your time, so we will definitely get the ball rolling right now. So today we have gathered a really good team that Lloyd Cambridge put together. a team of experts who are going to present this amazing topic about the what ifs and the right nows. So, I get a lot of help to put this event together. And this is where Curtis come in and tell us a little bit about the help that we get. Curtis loves that, so I can never take that away from him. But before Curtis get into it, tomorrow we're going to be touching about the virtual world today, and tomorrow we're going to be doing a webinar on selling in the virtual world, which is a whole different animal. And it's very different from selling live. So it's an art, and you need to master it, because this is not going anywhere. In fact, it's just going to get more virtual as we go, as time goes by. So I hope to see you tomorrow at the same time, 10 in the morning, and doing this webinar, which is going to be done by a score mentor. So Curtis, tell us a little bit about this great partnership that we enjoy. I mean, we always get great partners, and that's why this thing is so good.
Absolutely, Francisco. You know what? As the world paused, we continue. We continue to actually be in business, because, as I jokingly say, because we are the state of New York, we are your tax dollars at work, no doubt. And so, as you said, rightfully so, Francisco, we cannot do this alone. So our strategic partners in the community are the Harlem Business Alliance at 275 Malcolm X Boulevard. As a matter of fact, Francisco, we do know that Daryl T. Downing has joined us, and so he's there. And so if you have any specific questions for Daryl T. Downing of the Harlem Business Alliance, please send them to him in the chat. In addition, they are located, like I said, at 275. They provide one-on-one counseling. And in addition, of course, they can provide you folks with the MWBE city certification. And that is so very, very important for those who want to do business with the city of New York. Also, another one of our strategic partners is the New York Women's Chamber of Commerce, located at 1524 Amsterdam Avenue. Not only do they provide one-on-one counseling, and they also have, as I said, the MWBE city certification, they also have a particular component called Explore West Harlem, which actually gives you a taste of the small business community, as well as a number of the culinary delights that adorn West Harlem, which, as you know, Francisco, I'm a proud resident of West Harlem. So I can give you all the tours of some of the great eating establishments up there. That is the New York Women's Chamber of Commerce, headed up by Kenya Abreu. And I got to say also, Score NYC. Because, as a matter of fact, tomorrow's webinar will be led by them. They are one of our strategic partners that has a myriad of content for for-profits as well as nonprofit businesses, giving you an overview, giving you the tools necessary to help you compete in this, as we say, this new reality, which is how we do business during the time of COVID. So I'm really, really excited, as you said, Francisco, because Lloyd is one of our superstars. So when he's doing one of these webinars, we say, oh, but now he's also gotten us Lewis and Associates. So I'm interested to see the content and what they bring to bear on this. So I'm really, really excited, Francisco. What about you?
Always excited when I have Lloyd on here, and now he got all the people to back him up. So imagine how good this is going to be. I'm really happy, excited. So Lloyd, I don't know if you have any word. Why don't you introduce Tracy and your team, Lloyd?
Yeah, thank you, Curtis and Francisco. Always a pleasure working with you. Love Harlem. I was just telling Curtis I was there this past Sunday at Boulevard Bistro. Had some, what did I have? think I had catfish and something else. It was amazing. So we'll be making some more stops there and other places in Harlem. So always looking forward to supporting the local businesses there. But today,
Excellent.
yeah, I partnered with Tracy and her team over at Lewis and Associates. They do similar work in terms of providing programming, developing entrepreneurship and business programming for organizations throughout the country. And today we partnered to just kind of given the climate that we're in with COVID, and there are a ton of other emergencies like COVID that are happening, that will happen and that have happened in the past. We wanted to ensure that everyone is really prepared for future emergencies. Like, what do we have to do to get ready for future emergencies? So, and also thinking about succession planning as well, right? Curtis just mentioned that someone that we both know passed away, unfortunately. And sometimes those things are unexpected. So if that were to happen in your business, how do you plan for the next phase of your business? And so we'll be talking about both emergencies and succession planning. Tracy and her team, Marae, Wendy, and Kanisha are all amazing. So looking forward to delivering great content this morning. So is it on us? Okay, awesome.
Good morning, everyone. Please draw your attention to the presentation. Please note that the contents discussed during this course are the intellectual property and opinions of Lewis and Associates, LLC, and Progress Playbook. By registering and attending this workshop, you agree to not disclose any of the information presented. That includes not taking photos, videos, or screenshots of any materials or points of discussion within this workshop. Sharing your experience in detail is permissible and highly encouraged. Before acting upon any of the following opinions and suggestions given during the presentation, you should consult with your attorney or legal representative. We are excited to have you all here today. I'm going to give you the bio of a couple of our speakers. Draw your attention to your screen. Tracy Lewis is the CEO of Lewis and Associates, LLC. It was launched in the summer of 2014. Lewis and Associates, LLC was founded with the purpose of supporting nonprofit organizations and small businesses with resource development, technical assistance, strategic planning, community engagement, and project management services. In the past 2 years, she has expanded service delivery to government entities and philanthropic organizations. Lewis and Associates strives to provide short-term critical services that are beyond the scope, area of expertise, financial and/or time constraints of many small to mid-sized entities. Tracy leans on her 14-year background in the community and economic development field to provide customizable results-oriented solutions to all of her firm's clients. She is a graduate of Wayne State University in Detroit, Michigan, and holds a bachelor's in sociology and a master of public administration with a certificate in economic development. Lloyd Cambridge is the founder and CEO of Progress Playbook, a small business training and economic development consulting company. Lloyd partners with government agencies, nonprofits, and small businesses nationally to design customized learning experiences and inclusive growth strategies that support entrepreneurs in starting and scaling businesses locally and beyond. Progress Playbook's clients include New York City Department of Small Business Services, City Harvest, Brooklyn Children's Museum, the Actors Fund, New York University, and more. Prior to starting Progress Playbook, Lloyd was the director of NYC Business Solutions, and prior to that, he was an underwriter and credit analyst at JP Morgan Chase for their middle market division. Lloyd has supported over 10,000 entrepreneurs and business owners throughout his career and has shared his expertise on entrepreneurship and business development with organizations like Goldman Sachs, 10,000 Small Businesses, the Small Business Administration, and New York University. Lloyd earned his BS in economics from NYU and is an alumni of the Coro Leadership Network. Wendy Calvert Wendy Calvert began her career as a corporate attorney and advisor, where she successfully managed and litigated matters in Illinois and Wisconsin. Wendy subsequently launched her own practice in Illinois and now utilizes her skills as a business advisor, contract negotiator, and litigation attorney to negotiate business and real estate deals to assist business owners create and grow their entrepreneurial dreams. Wendy earned her Juris Doctor in 1999 from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. After graduating with a Bachelor of Arts in Business Administration and Communications from Marquette University. These are your panelists for today. We're going to start. I'm going to put a link in the chat. Can everyone please locate your chat? This is going to be an icebreaker just to kind of get a feel of where everyone is.
I'm sorry, the presentation went out.
Okay, if they can focus on the chat area, we'll get the presentation back up. I just dropped the link in the presentation in the chat section. And if you can go to the chat, click on the link and respond. We'll give you about 45 seconds to do that. And as you can see, the responses are popping up now. What are you hoping to learn today? We have general knowledge in marketing online, learn how to modify my business plan and play around the different adversities, some insight on business planning, get more information to help run my business planning resources and mentorship. How do we get clarity on the bigger purpose of running our businesses right now? Information to help small business owners be more prepared and equipped, and how to sustain post-COVID, how to target new clients. So I'm going to put, and we also have how to complete a business plan. I'm going to put this. If you click on the link, you'll be able to see all of the live results. All right, we're going to get started. And we're going to talk about emergency business planning. And that is going to bring Mr. Lloyd Cambridge to the table. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Marae. Thank you, everybody again, Tracy, Curtis, Francisco, Wendy, and Kanisha. So the purpose of this presentation again today is really to talk about emergency planning and succession planning as a business owner. These are critical and important topics that many of us really don't consider when we are launching or we're operating our current businesses. There's so many emergencies and disasters and tragedies that can happen, right? Either externally, meaning, think about COVID, or you think about Hurricane Sandy, or you think about 9/11, or you think about some of the blackouts that we've had in New York City. So those are kind of like external factors that can impact our business, right? And then you also have internal factors or internal emergencies or disasters that can also impact your business as well, right? Maybe a supplier or a vendor is unable to supply your goods or your goods on time, or maybe specific vendors taking a lot longer than what you originally anticipated, or maybe there was a warehouse that caught on fire, right? So you have both internal and external risk. And when you're thinking about business planning, you also want to think about how do you mitigate, how do you prepare for emergencies, how do you prepare for disasters when they occur? Because one thing that we do know is that emergencies, disasters, and risk are an inherent factor in any business, right? So let's look at some of these headlines, like winter storms continue to hammer businesses, right? How might that impact your business? Businesses trying to rebound after unrest. We've seen a lot of unrest that have taken place last year, especially after George Floyd. Some businesses had to literally border up their businesses to protect themselves from that specific risk. And we can go on in terms of headlines that we've seen over the years. So let's just talk a little bit about what's the difference between an emergency and a disaster. So an emergency is essentially are usually small scale localized incidences which are resolved quickly using local resources. So again, you can think about an emergency as being more of like an internal risk. So whether there's like a fire that has taken place in your establishment, for example, or maybe you have an employee who has essentially captured information from your computer or your drives, and they're using that information for their own benefit. Or you can think about a disaster as being our typically larger scale and cross geographic, political, and academic boundaries. So you think about COVID, or you think about Hurricane Sandy. So all of these things, whether it's an emergency where it's more localized, or a disaster where it's more kind of widespread, we need, as business owners, we need to be prepared for both of these events. So FEMA said that 40% of small businesses never reopen following a disaster. 40%, that's a huge number, right? So FEMA, as you know, is a federal agency. So just think about that statistic for a second. 40% of small businesses never reopen following a disaster. So you've spent all of your time, energy, and money building a business that you love to provide for yourself, your family, your community, and something happens like COVID again, right? And you're unable to open because you were not prepared for that disaster and or emergency, right? So we want to be able to mitigate these risks so that we won't be a part of this statistic here. And I would say that this is really important because, again, like in business planning, a lot of folks talk about like the marketing piece, the financial piece, strategic planning, and all of those things, but many people don't talk about risk management inside of the business plan, which is a really critical part. So let's think about some of these scenarios really quickly. Like, what if a hacker or angry former employee stole proprietary information and trade secrets from your computers, right? If this event were to happen today, how would this impact your business? Would you lose money? Could they use that information and will be able to kind of compete with you or use it against you in some way? Like, I've actually had this happen to me as a business owner as well. So it's really important to protect your information, right? That's one thing that you can do to mitigate this risk, this inherent risk in any business. So what if there was a devastating hurricane or earthquake, a fire, a flood, or even a terrorist attack? We've experienced all of these in New York City over the last 10 to 15 years in various scales. How might these events impact your business today? Will you lose money? Will you still be able to service your customers? How would this impact your operations? So really the end goal, right? So we know that all of these risks can potentially happen, these emergencies and these disasters. These are risks that we are exposed to. And the goal is, despite the risk, we want to have continuity of business, right? So somebody mentioned in the chat during the Minty Meter question, how do I rebound via COVID? How do I still get customers, right? So the goal is to rebound, to have continuity of business, even when an emergency or disaster plays out. So in my portion of the presentation, we're going to talk about four things. We're going to define the four types of business risk and understand their potential impact on your business. We're going to outline the 6 steps to prepare for emergencies, and then we're going to define the 4 phases of emergency management and describe activities associated with each phase. So I kind of said this earlier, but there are 3 phases of everyone's business, right? You have the planning phase, where you're strategizing, you're thinking about the resources that you need in order to be able to launch or to take your business to the next level. We call that like the building phase. So you go from planning, which is thinking and strategy, to the building phase, which is really about like executing on the plan. But there's a big piece that many of us miss in this whole business thing, which is really about protection, right? So you want to protect what you're building. It's not enough just to plan and to build. We also want to protect the assets. We want to protect what we're building so that in the event of an emergency or a disaster or anything, any risks that we have in our business, we want to fully protect ourselves from those things happening. So when you think about your business assets, essentially what we want to do is we want to be able to protect our assets, right? So there are different assets that every business has. So you have your people, yourself, your employees, your staff, your contractors even, or your vendors that may work with you. You have places, right? So where you do business out of, maybe it's out of your home right now, or your restaurant, or wherever you do business, right? You have a place, you have things, you have your equipment and your computer, you have other types of assets that fall under things. And then you have your processes, right? So essentially how you do business. So we call those like the inputs. Those are assets. Those assets that you use on the input side, ultimately, once you use them effectively, you're going to produce some outputs, right? Like your reputation, right? Your cash flow, your ability to bring in cash, and to use your cash accordingly. Those are the outputs. So all of these are assets, and all of these assets need to be protected. So we have these assets, and these assets must be, again, like I said, protected, right? So we want to think about, so each of the assets that I just mentioned, there are risk associated with each of those assets. So business risks are threats to a company's ability to be able to operate, right? So what threats are there against your assets? What are the threats against your assets when it comes to those input assets? And then how is that going to impact your output assets, your cash, and your reputation, right? So there are 4 different types of business risks. We have external risks. I spoke about it earlier. Those are things that are not necessarily connected to our kind of internal operations. So like natural disasters, unrest, slow paying customers, for example. And then you have internal risks, right? So the threat, theft of goods. So maybe people are stealing goods out of your store. Loss of customers through poor customer service. These are all risks, right? That can impact your cash, that can impact your ability to continue doing business. High turnover rates. You have security risks. Somebody may, breach your some of your software. Then you have reputational risk as well, right? So your name is everything in the industry. So maybe they're poor customer reviews. So essentially, like these unmanaged risks can lead to so many things. If we don't understand that we have assets, these assets, there are certain risks associated with these assets that we have. And if we don't manage those risks, if we don't manage our assets, essentially many terrible things can happen, from fatalities and injuries to your damage of buildings and stock and equipment, and to loss in revenue and profitability, disruption of your business operations, and ultimately, just like that FEMA quote, it could lead to business closure. 40%, again, of businesses that are not prepared for disasters ultimately close. So emergencies are inevitable. COVID-19 will not be the last emergency or disaster that we will experience in our lifetime. So we need to be prepared for them. So ultimately, we want to hope for the best. I'm not hoping for another COVID-19. I'm not hoping for more social unrest. I'm not hoping for any of this stuff. But I'm hoping for the best, but I want to be able to be prepared for the worst. And this is a great quote written by Chris Bradford. So just quick question for you guys. How has COVID-19 impacted your business? So let's just think about this as being a risk that may have impacted your business in some way. So we're going to put another chat in the Minty Meter. Sorry, we're going to put another link into the chat for Minty Meter. Just curious, thinking about your business, thinking about the last year and a half, 2 years, how has COVID impacted your business negatively or positively? Just take about 45 seconds to do that. And then we're going to pull those results up as well. Got it. So some of the results are coming in. 50% of business closure, 50% of lost revenue, unexpected expenses, loss of staff. Some folks have not been impacted at all. See some folks coming into the chat here. Someone lost $14,000 of their original investment. All right, so it looks like a loss of revenue has been the key impact, followed by unexpected expenses, then business closure and loss of staff, and then fortunately for some of you, no impact at all. All right, so this is evidence based off of what I just spoke about earlier, that if we're not prepared for disasters and emergencies, those results will manifest, right? And not that we can mitigate all of the negative impact of disasters and emergencies, but our goal is how can we be prepared for future ones when they do come and lessen the impact when they do happen. So we're going to talk about the 6 steps to emergency management. First one is to ground yourself. You're going to identify your emergency management planning team. You're going to conduct a risk assessment, create an emergency management plan, train your team on the plan, and then lastly, update and revise your plan regularly. All right, so the first thing that we wanted to highlight here is, thinking about risks, thinking about all the things that could potentially go wrong in your business. No one wants to think about that. Nobody wants to think about losing business, losing customers, losing staff. These are hard things to face and to deal with, right? So one of the first things you have to do is really to ground yourself, right? So you need to ask yourself, who do you need to be in order to be able to do what's necessary so that you can have ultimately what you want to have, which is really the continuity of business. So one of the first things you need to do is center yourself, right? Nobody likes to think about, well, what if, all of these what if questions? Well, what if I pass away? What if somebody on my team passes away? Or what if, something similar to our COVID-19 happened? Those are hard things to really face. So the first thing that we need to do is center ourselves. Tracy is going to talk about confronting and courage. And then ultimately what we want to do is create a plan of action to deal with these things. So once you really ground yourself, the second step is to identify your emergency management planning team. So you're trying to plan for emergencies and disasters. Again, this should be a part of your business plan. And ultimately, you may not necessarily want to do this alone or by yourself. So whoever you have on your team, whether it's your executive leadership team, your public relations, your human resources team, finance, purchasing. I know many of you are small businesses. You may not have all of these folks on your team right now, but whoever you have on your team, they need to be a part of the conversation to say, hey, what if these things happen? How are we going to be prepared in the event that they do happen? So that's the second step. The third step is to do a risk assessment, right? So you've grounded yourself and you've built up the courage and the confidence to confront the what ifs. You have brought together a team of people. Maybe it's just yourself right now, and that's okay. Or maybe you have a small team of about 2 to 3 people or even larger that can support you. So the third step is really to conduct a risk assessment. A risk assessment is a process of identifying potential risks and analyzing their impact on your business assets and the outcomes, right? So what are the risks that can potentially happen in the business, and how might they impact my assets, both the inputs and the outputs, and then what are we going to do about it ultimately, right? So you want to identify what risk your business faces. You're going to categorize each risk by how likely it is to happen. You're going to determine what assets are at risk, and then you're going to define the potential impact on those assets if an emergency were to occur. So what does that look like? You're going to conduct a risk assessment. So the first part of that risk assessment is to think about what are some of the what ifs? What if a natural disaster happened, or a fire, or a power outage, or utility loss, or a pandemic, or there's an illness or death, or software or hardware failure, our supply chain disruption, social unrest, and there's so many other risks that each of our businesses are exposed to. So the risk assessment looks something like this. So you're saying, what if, right? So think about your risk as like the what ifs. What if a pandemic happens? What's the likelihood of that thing actually happening over the next 3 to 5 years? All right. Let's say, over the next 3 to 5 years. And if that thing happens, which one of my assets are at risk? Is it my workforce, my suppliers, my property, my equipment, my inventory? And then if that happens, what's going to be the impact? Right? If we do nothing, will there be casualties? Will I lose revenue? Will there be enhanced expenses? Will there be certain financial loss? Would I lose some of my potential customers if this thing happens, right? So again, what's the risk? What's the likelihood of that thing happening? What assets are at risk? And then what's the potential impact? And obviously you want to pay attention to, first, you want to deal with those risks that have a high probability of happening, like the hurricanes and floods. In this example, thinking about global warming, that's a relevant risk that all of our businesses, especially if you have a physical location, that you are exposed to. So once we do this risk assessment, and we're going to prioritize our risk, right, based off of the likelihood of that thing happening, the fourth step is to create an emergency management plan, which we're going to talk about right now. So this really answers the question, if an emergency happens, then what? What do I do? So there are really 4 phases of this emergency management plan. First one, we're going to talk about all 4, mitigate, prepare, respond, and then ultimately to recover. Many of us focus on the recovery piece, right? So once COVID happened, we tried to figure out, well, how am I going to continue my business? How am I going to continue to get revenue, reduce my expenses? But nobody paid attention to the mitigation or the preparedness or the response or responding to an emergency. Everybody went to recovery, but the recovery could have been a lot better if we were prepared and we would have done the other 3 steps in advance. So mitigation preparedness, this phase includes actions taken to prevent or reduce the cause or impact and consequences of a disaster or an emergency, right? So there are little things that we could start doing today, right? I know that business is so demanding and we have so many things that we have to do to kind of keep the business going, to keep sales coming in, to satisfy our customers. But I don't want you to forget about this this mitigation piece. So you're thinking through your risk, and you're saying, well, what are some things that I can do right now, right? So simple things like, if you have a physical location, have a fire and carbon system checks, backing up all of your important documents on the cloud. I remember during Hurricane Sandy, that a lot of businesses were unable to get access to financing because they didn't have their documents, their tax documents, their legal documents backed up. Buying insurance policies, these are all things that you can start to do. Many others, obviously, and this really depends on your risk, but you want to think about, what if this happens? What are some things that I can do now to mitigate those things if they were to occur, if these risks or emergencies or disasters were to occur? So the second stage of this emergency plan is to be prepared, right? So now we've gone through mitigation, we've thought through things that we can do today. The second thing is thinking about, I want to be prepared for when an emergency actually takes place, because we know that emergencies and disasters are inevitable. They will take place. They will happen. It's like the market. Things go up and down. It's cyclical, right? So this phase includes planning and training and educational activities for events that cannot be mitigated. There's certain things that you cannot mitigate. I cannot mitigate COVID-19 from happening. That was something that I could not have mitigated, right? So I want to think about, how am I going to be prepared for a future emergency? So one thing that you can do is like develop an emergency action plan for what to do, where to go, or who to call in an emergency. Think about all of those fire drills that we used to do back in the day when we at school or we were working for our employers, or maybe in your own business, right? So those things, this is a part of being prepared for an emergency. Maybe you're practicing plans through drills and tabletop exercises and full scale exercises. You're creating a supply list of items that are useful during an emergency, right? So these are different ways that we can be prepared for an emergency. So now we know, so we've mitigated some of our risk. We know that we can't mitigate everything, so we need to create a plan, an emergency plan. And then there's something else called an action plan, which is different from the emergency plan. So an action plan, the response phase occurs in the immediate aftermath of a disaster, right? So if we know that disasters and emergencies will take place, right? And we're prepared, we have all of our kind of items that we need. We prepared for it, we've trained for it, we've educated our staff on it. And we have a list of things that we've essentially have a list of things that we need to do. The next thing is like, once the emergency actually takes place, once the disaster actually takes place, I need to have kind of like a checklist of things that I need to do when this thing happens, right? So during the response phase, businesses and other operations do not function normally. When COVID-19 happened and everything kind of went out, normal operations went out the window. Right? Personal safety and well-being is an emergency, and the duration of the response phase depend on the level of your preparedness. How prepared are you for an emergency? So you want to put together an action plan. This can be implementing a disaster response plan, conducting search and rescue missions. I know that's a little extreme, but definitely could happen. Taking actions to protect yourself, your family, if you have animals, etc., and others. So you want to also create an action plan in addition to being prepared for those emergencies. Then lastly, this is the phase that many of us focused in on after COVID took place, right? Because we didn't mitigate, we didn't create a preparedness plan or an action plan. Many of us focused on the continuity plan, right? So continuity plan outlines the action your business will take to protect your people, places, things, and business functions to maintain or quickly resume operations and continue to serve your customers after a disruption, right? So what are we going to do to continue to serve our people, right? So if we would have thought about COVID-19 2 years ago, and nobody did, obviously, or 3 years ago, if we did that risk assessment, we would have said, well, if a pandemic happens, and we're unable to work, out of our location, how are we still going to be able to service our customers, right? So a lot of us would have been prepared in advance in terms of say, hey, we may need to go, digital. We may need to build a website, right? So part of your preparedness plan would have been building a website, making sure that you're on social media, right? Making sure that you have a list of all of your customers, making sure that you have emails in place in the event that an emergency happens, that people know who to contact, right? So this is about continuity, things about like preventing or reducing stress-related illnesses and excessive financial burdens, rebuilding damaged structures based on advanced knowledge obtained from preceding disasters or emergencies, identifying ways to serve your customers during and after a disaster as well. Now, I know many of these things are kind of high level. We are building out a more intensive program around this, which will dive deeper into all of these, but wanted to make you all aware of the various emergency planning phases, at least be aware of it. And I think that you can start the process today. So step 5 is to train your team and your emergency management plan. So once you go through those 4 phases, I know it's a lot. The next stage is really about training your people, right? You have this plan, but if no one knows how to execute the plan, it doesn't mean anything. So who needs to be trained and on what? Who will design, deliver, and manage the training? What resources are needed to deliver the training? How often will you deliver the training to your team? And how will you assess your team's preparedness based on that training? Those are some key questions that you want to ask yourself. Then, the sixth step, and this is the last step, at least for the emergency planning piece, you want to update and revise your emergency management plan regularly, right? Because guess what? The market is changing, right? So your risks are changing every single day, right? So I would do this probably like once a year to kind of go back to your risk assessments and to assess, are there new risks that we're exposed to that's not included on this plan? You may want to update your important contact information. You may want to look at your insurance policies on an annual basis. Think about your financial resources. Do we have enough cash on hand to be able to actually execute the emergency management plan and action plan, and to support us with the continuity of business as well? So this is something that you want to think through at least on an annual basis. It may be a little bit painful to kind of create all of this upfront, but once you get it done, it's done, and you won't be a part of that 40% that FEMA spoke about, that I spoke about in terms of that core a little bit earlier in the presentation. So ultimately, here are the 6 steps for emergency planning. Again, you're going to ground yourself, right? Have the courage, have the center yourself to face the unknown, to face things, to face the what ifs. You're going to identify your emergency management planning team. Again, that can just be you or your small team right now. You're going to conduct a risk assessment. You're going to think about the what ifs. If these things happen, how will this impact my assets? How will this impact my cash flow, my reputation? You want to also think about the likelihood of those what ifs actually taking place, right? And then you're going to begin to plan based off of the likelihood of those things happening, high, medium, or low. You're going to create an emergency management plan, which consists of mitigation, planning, action plan, and then the continuity of business. You're going to train your people on the plan, and then you're going to update and revise the plan regularly because things change every single day. So lastly, if you want to enjoy the rainbow, and we all do, be prepared for the storm. Be prepared, folks. I think COVID was a wake-up call for all of us. We know that new things will happen in the future, and we have the power right now to make sure that we are prepared for future emergencies and disasters. So thank you. I'm going to pass the mic to Tracy. Can I hear you, Tracy? You're still on mute. Still on mute. Here you go.
Sorry about that. I was trying to get off mute. I am doing dual task here in that I am advancing the slides and also presenting to you all. So first, I definitely want to extend gratitude to Harlem Community Development Corporation, and gratitude to all of you for wanting to be in the space of, planning for the what ifs as it pertains to your lives and your businesses. We're really passionate about putting this type of content together because we're bothered by that 43% number. We want to see more of our businesses do more than just survive. We want to see our businesses thrive. And so we saw that this was an essential component, and based upon our research and analysis and all these things, and just as entrepreneurs ourselves, we felt this was a relevant topic and we wanted to share it with you all. So I know Lloyd spent, quite a bit of time talking about, current emergencies and disasters. But when we think about planning for what's next, we need to think in terms of what happens to our businesses, what happens after, after an emergency. Now we've got our emergency management plan. We've got our continuity of business in place. Let's revisit our why we went into business. And for many Black and Brown business owners, our why is about, generating wealth, but also generating generational wealth, right? And, there comes a point in our lives where presumably we're not going to work at our business forever, right? So, thinking about the what ifs, we need to think about what's next, right? And so this is where we're going to talk about succession planning and what succession planning means. But before we dive into that, I want us to kind of imagine, if you will, your business is successful and growing. You have 10 employees. You have 5 major contracts that generate over $1 million in annual revenue. You have $150,000 in annual expenses through a variety of vendors. So you're doing good, or you're at least on your way. You may have bigger aspirations than this, but your business is up and going. So you're in that space where you're doing more than surviving, you're thriving, right? And then a global pandemic hits, right? So if we go back to that slide in terms of how COVID-19 has impacted your business, some of you were very fortunate to not have any impact. That was a smaller percentage, but most of us either lost revenue, we encountered unanticipated expenses, things like that. But, thankfully we're here, and we're not in this space. But part of the motivation for us putting this presentation together is because we came across business owners that passed away. They encountered the emergency and they didn't make themselves through it. And after they passed away, things were kind of left unresolved. Right, there wasn't a plan after that, right? So that's one of the emergencies that we want to cover. But in addition to that continuity plan that Lloyd talked about, we need to think about that succession plan. So if the worst comes to worst, what happens to our business after we're gone? And if we come back to our why, and if it's one of your reasons is generating generational wealth, then you want to have structures in place to enable that to happen. So we're going to pause for a second here, and we're going to go into our next polling question. What do you plan to do with your business in the next 20 years? So give me just a moment here while I switch screens. But be thinking about that. There we go. Be thinking about that question. What do you want to have happen with your business in the next 20 years? Do you want to, I'll share my example. I know I would like to retire to an island, right? I live in the Midwest. The winters are very cold here. I think, this past winter we got several feet of snow. I know I don't want to be dealing with that type of stuff in the next 20 years. I have children. Or a child rather, I want to make sure that they have income and things like that. So I want to be thinking about how that is going to impact my business. So my esteemed colleague should have put a link in the chat, and I think we're already getting responses in. So what do you want to have happen with your business in the next 20 years? So right now, some of you have responded and said, I plan to pass my business down to the children. 50% of you all have said, I plan to sell my business and put the proceeds into an interest-bearing account. That's awesome. So you're thinking about how can your money make money. But we'll give you about 45 seconds to think through what your response to this question, and we'll move on. And part of the reason that we're thinking about this is again, it's coming back to that why. Why are we in business? How do we plan to continue our business beyond emergencies, beyond our successes? What does this mean? So we'll give it a couple more seconds for you guys to click that link in the chat so that you can provide a response. So just seeing some things that are coming up in the chat. We have someone that says they want to grow globally. That's awesome. I know I'd like to have that aspiration for my business as well. So it looks like we have a pretty even split. So that's good. You guys are thinking ahead. One, you want to plan to pass your business down to your children, or you plan to sell your business. So I'm happy and encouraged to see that we don't have the I don't knows and we don't have to continue working on our business. So bear with me as I switch back to our presentation. All right. So, even though most of us in this space may be small businesses, all businesses, whether you're, as large or have the ambitions to grow globally, like I saw a person post in the chat, you want to be the next Amazon, or you want to be the next Time Warner company or something like that. Large or small, you need to have a plan to pass the torch and be ready for that. And this is just a headline here that we know Amazon is, one of the biggest businesses in the world, and they have a plan to succeed. So a statistic that we have here is that 43% of family-owned businesses don't have a succession plan. So we had 50% of you all responded that you plan to pass your business down to the children, but you don't have a plan in place to see how that happens. So part of what we're going to do is we're going to talk about what are the steps to start getting into that space. So one of the things that we developed as a part of our curriculum here today is what we call 4 C's. So Lloyd covered that notion that we need to have courage, and we need to create emergency business plans. We have courage to confront the uncomfortable, and then we need to create from that. But one of the things that I'm going to really hone in on, or one of the C's that I'm really going to hone in on, is confront. So as a leader of your organization, how do you show up as an individual when you're facing the uncomfortable circumstance? Nobody wants to think about their untimely denies, but we know that death is a part of life, but it's something that's difficult to think about. But I mean, that's something that we have to be able to confront. And then also, this may be an opportunity to confront the things that may be not functioning very well in our business. And so we have to have the courage, but we also have to have the courage to confront that. And then again, it's also about revisiting the why. Why did you go into business? Was it just solely to generate income? Was it to pass down and create generational wealth? We need to confront those issues as well, because they're going to serve as the motivation to developing our succession plan. So just a quote that I'm sharing here: only those who confront unusual challenges can flaunt unusual success. Right? So that's just a motivation. So in addition to just giving you these tactics and strategies, we believe in holistic development of the entrepreneur. So thinking through how you show up as an individual, as an entrepreneur, as just a human being in this space is really the intent behind these quotes and our 4 C's. So what I'm going to cover with respect to succession planning, and then after I kind of get you started, I felt that it was of most important value to share some actual legal information to get you started on the journey as well. So at that point, I'll kick it over to my colleague, Wendy Calvert, to talk a little bit about her experience as a business planning and estate attorney. So first, we're going to cover the definition of what a succession plan is. I have had the instances where I've talked to business owners and they don't even know what a succession plan is. So we're going to start that conversation. You will leave here knowing exactly what that is. And then knowing that it's more than just a definition, there are actual types of succession planning. And so we talk about family legacy, selling your business, a management transfer, or cooperative ownership type of model. And this is just a small snapshot. There's other types of succession plans. There's a labyrinth of information that's out here, but we just pulled these to the top. And then thinking about where to start. So how you choose your successor, you develop a training, you set a timetable, and you plan and execute. So kind of similar, following the similar planning strategies that we talked about in emergency business planning. So it's kind of a setup. We're building you up incrementally. We're building your capacity. So once you get that emergency planning, succession planning, some of those same strategies are going to apply. And then we talk about what to expect. And that's really, Wendy is going to cover more information in that category. So succession planning involves a transfer of transferring ownership and control of your business to new management. So there's several things to consider. So with succession planning is a strategy for passing on leadership roles. Succession planning ensures that a business will continue to run smoothly after the most important employees have moved on. And then it also considers cross-training those employees. So, you know, we may all have that succession plan in our head, but we need to bring it out of our head and let the most important people in our business know what our intentions are. So we already kind of did some visioning in terms of, you know, what's your vision of the future and what the role does your business play in your future. So the other 50% of people that responded to our question said they want to put their business in an interest-bearing account, right? But so we have to start thinking about that. What type of interest? What type of account? What does it look like? What are the tax implications that are going to be encountered with that? If I know I want to retire to an island, how much money am I going to need to make that successful? What type of lifestyle? Do I want to build a shack in the middle of a jungle, or do I want to have a huge compound with a villa and a wait staff and all those types of things? How does our business play a role in that future vision? If we know that we want to pass our business down to a family member, what type of experience does that family member have? Are they well suited for the position? So we want to think about all of those types of things. So with succession planning, you know, a lot of things that, especially I think for Black and Brown business owners and many business owners in general, as we think about keeping it in the family, but there are other options, right? So you can sell your business, you could pass down your business to really high performing, impactful employees, or you can think about cooperative ownership. So how you create an ownership model that has an opportunity to generate community wealth so that you have more people in the business that own a piece of the business and are part of the business proceeding forward at its next phase. So with keeping it in the family, I'm going to briefly go through these. We talk about experience. So I'll use myself as an example. My daughter, she's 11. She wants to be a fashion designer and an artist, and she wants to have her own girl band. So my business, we do community engagement, strategic planning, and project management. So she's not interested in what I want to do, and she's not interested in what I'm doing. And so I may have the ambition that I want to pass my business down to her, but is that actually really realistic? Is she going to have the expertise to maintain the relationships? Is she going to have the expertise to be able to provide the same level of services and things of that nature? And so when we're talking about passing our business down to our family members, do they have the interest? Do they have the experience? Are they able to maintain the business at the same or similar capacity for it to be successful? And so we have to, again, confront that type of dynamic. Is that going to be something that is going to be realistic when we're talking about passing our business down to family members? With selling your business, you know, that's something that maybe be a more realistic option for me. We want to consider the value of your business. Is your business performing well? And then also knowing with selling your business that may mean that the business structure may change at some point. The other thing we want to think about with another type of succession planning is a management transfer, right? So who on our current team should be involved in that process? What are the types of things that they need to be able to take over the helm, to know all of the ins and outs of the business? A lot of times when we're small business owners or micro business owners, it's just us, right? So, but if we have that one management person, they may not be connected to the business as intimately as you are. So part of it is, you know, kind of getting us in this space where we need to come off of that information, right? And then we want to be realistic, again, similar to keeping it in the family, you know, being very strategic about our selection. Do they have the right experience? Do they have the ability to maintain the relationships? Do they know the business like you do? That's something else to consider. So cooperative ownership is a model that we don't see talked about a lot, but it's an opportunity to generate community wealth. So how is there an opportunity to create a model where several individuals can come in and have community ownership over the business? But this is kind of an innovative model. So you want to consider the timing with this and how much time it will take to develop a model that is equitable, that's reasonable, but still considers all of those other things that we talked about with the other models. So again, one of our other C's is we have to think about courage, right? So with courage, how can you plan to be consistently courageous? Succession planning is not a one and done process. So similar to emergency planning, where you want to update and revisit that plan on an annual basis, you want to be thinking about your succession plan in the same type of frame. And don't be afraid to address dysfunction. Like with the emergency planning process and with this process, you may identify certain gaps in your business. So you have to be courageous to confront those types of things, but understand that it's always an opportunity to improve your business and the lifeline of your business. And so you also have to just be courageous to lead and make tough decisions. So you can choose courage, or you can choose comfort, but you can't choose both, right? And I think just being in the space of being an entrepreneur, we already chose a little realm of discomfort with that, right? So you're not as far off as you think with that. So I'm going to go real quickly in terms of where do I start with my succession plan. So the first thing is you want to choose a successor. But, you know, when you start looking at that, a lot of times, one of those statistics that we shared earlier was that family business, people want to pass it down to family, right? And families may benefit from this, but when you're thinking about that family planning, like I know I want to retire in about 30 years, you know, so in about another 10, 15 years, if my daughter decides she doesn't want to be a fashion designer and she wants to do something like what mom is doing, it may be time to bring her into the business and bring her up to speed. And again, thinking about those considerations, am I choosing the right person? Is this person going to have the right experience? All that type of stuff. But again, you want to ground yourself in being realistic. So even though 50% of you responded saying that you want to pass your business down to family members, only 30% of businesses actually do that. So again, similar to emergency business planning, where you need to establish that training, you know, those fire drills, those emergency plans, you know, you're doing rescue and disaster missions and all of those types of things. That's a lot. We're not necessarily going to require you to do that here, but you do want to develop a formal training plan. So you want to identify the critical functions of the company and then have your successor work in those areas, right? So again, as small business owners, as micro business owners, a lot of that information is in our head. So part of it is digesting it, getting it out, and getting it into the ears and heads of your team so that they understand the business as intimately as you do. But again, we want to ground yourself and making sure that just like emergencies are inevitable, change is inevitable. So we make sure that we're in tune with, are there industry changes that we have to be cognizant of? Are there other external conditions that we have to be cognizant of? And one of the most critical things is we want to set a timetable, right? And, you know, we're planning for, you know, having these long drawn out lives. We're all going to die when we're 101 or beyond. But that may not happen. So it's not something you necessarily want to sit on, but you do want to establish a timetable with all of the considerations that are a part of your business. And also with that, developing a communication plan. So if you know that you're planning to step away from your business in 10 years, you want to start thinking about that and preparing your company and your staff for that. And your partners for that as well. And then planning your retirement. That's again coming back to that visioning piece. You know I'm going to retire to an island somewhere. I want to be closer to the equator where it's tropical weather and I'm sipping drinks with a little umbrella hat in it and all that kind of stuff. But again, I have to think about what type of money am I going to need for that? How long do I plan to be in that type of situation? And how do I need to set up my business to fund that? And then you want to execute your succession plan. So again, we're all gonna, you know, be centenarians here and live to 100 and beyond. So, you know, once we've made this plan, we want to actually execute it and see it take into place. Or even if we want to sell our business or transfer our business in some other capacity, we want to be able to execute that plan. So at this point, I'm going to kick it over to Wendy, and she's going to talk us through expectations.
Good morning, everyone. Tracy, thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of this program. Thank you to the organizers. Continuing on the theme for today, we're going to take a moment to dive into estate planning, which is the very foundation of succession planning. It has become even more critical with COVID that business owners start thinking in that capacity. This type of planning requires you to have the ability to center and focus on your goals along with the needs of your family. Tracy just talked about succession planning, picking a successor. You kind of want to engage your family into this process so they know what's going on, you know what's going on, and that this is more of an easier transition in the long run. Once you engage your family, I want you to have the courage to confront this type of planning so that you can create your own legacy plan, which is critical. I've seen too many business owners die, and when they die, the business stops. The goals stops, their dreams stop. You have created, spent so much time creating a business that you worked hard for. Now is the time to enjoy the fruits of your labor. So just a really quick housekeeping note. I think my slide's a little bit out of order, but I'm just going to talk to them anyways. This is a very general and broad outline. The information I'm giving you here, I'm encouraging you to begin to have these discussions with your family members and your team. Lloyd hit on some of the planning that you need to be doing as far as your emergency preparedness. Tracy talked about succession. These are the discussions that you want to start having. So everybody, I just want to encourage you, everybody needs a plan. You need a business plan. You also need your legacy plan. You need to have a plan for the care of your loved ones. So what happens to you if something happens to them? I mean, what happens to them if something happens to you? Another thing that you want to do, and I'm not sure if anybody's experienced this, unfortunately I have, you want to minimize family disputes because you may think that it's not a big deal, but if something happens to you, and I've spelled disputes incorrectly, I apologize for that. If something happens to you, you'll find out how quickly people value what it is that you're leaving behind and how quickly they can destroy it with different family disputes and arguments. You want to make sure that your wishes are clear and that you control all of your process and assets to make sure that it passes appropriately to everyone in your family or to whoever you want it to pass to, your successor, your family members, or whoever it is that you select to be your successor. So everyone needs to have a clear plan. So the first thing I get from a lot of my clients is that I don't have an estate plan. I don't own anything. I don't even know where to begin. The key thing is everybody does have an estate. And you will be surprised if something happens to you that this is a common misconception. And you may not be aware of how much of you have an estate plan, but trust me, if something happens to you, your family will become immediately aware of what you have and what you don't have. So some of the things that goes into an estate is everything that you own along with everything that you owe. So I'm going to say that again, an estate is more than what you just own. It also is what you owe. So you want to make sure that that plan is taken care of so that you leave a proper legacy for your family members. A closer look at an estate shows that it includes their cars, house, stocks, finances, your kids, your dogs. On another level, it includes your business inventory, your business contacts, your assets, your passwords. A lot of people don't understand that things like your social media information is also part of your legacy and part of your estate. What happens to you? If something happens to you, what happens to that information? Is it out there indefinitely? Do you have the ability to control that? A lot of estate plans now include having someone that's going to be responsible for having a kill switch, so to speak, or control over those particular assets. Unfortunately, I've seen way too many people have a Facebook page, and if they pass on, I have a cousin, she died 5 years ago, her Facebook page is still live. So you want to make sure that that's included as part of your assets. then the most important thing for business owners as part of your estate plan are the relationships that you've built. Part of that, like when you go to sell, go to manage it, your business relationships are normally your key your key your key asset in your business. It's all those business relationships you have created. So Wendy, what happens if I do not have a plan? If you fail to plan, that means potentially the probate court or the courts will decide what happens to your stuff. It is very public. It is very destructive, and it's a very long process. I've seen many people when they go into court, you have to put everybody, all your creditors on notice. You have to let all of your family members, put them on notice. And it's amazing how many family members will show up if something happens to you, claiming a part of your estate. For example, in some states, it's a 50-50. So 50% will go to the spouse, and then 50% will go to the family. In some other places, it can be divided up and according to the succession line. So in other words, you might have 6 kids, you might have a spouse, then it'd be divided 50, 10, 10, 10, 10, and 10. So you have to be very aware of what's going on as far as your estate planning to make sure that you plan for your assets. The lack of the planning increases the burden on your loved ones to make decisions that they shouldn't have to and that they don't want to. Probate is the court supervised process which transfers title of your assets to your heirs upon death. And that's if you die intestate or with a will. I want to make that a key factor here. A lot of people do wills. Wills are a good thing to have, but when you're business owners, I actually recommend a trust. A trust is a living document. It allows you to make changes. It allows you to make updates. It allows you to appoint someone who is going to be over your assets. Not only will you be able to appoint one person, you can also have a successor beneficiary or a successor executor. So some of the estate planning tools that you will have access to or should have access to, again, a will, revocable living trust, power of attorney for your finances and your business. I don't know how many times I've actually dealt with something that happens to a business owner and they don't have a power of attorney in place. I would also encourage buy-sell agreements. That's something that you put in place to kind of decide who your successor is going to be and how the property is going to be transferred. You need a business succession plan. And that's the same as your business plan, but you also want to add that into where there's a succession portion of it. That even goes into your bylaws for your LLCs and your corporation. You want to have a plan in place that's just something happened to you or something happens to the corporation, it can continue. You also need a power of attorney for healthcare. And that's very critical, particularly with COVID. If you don't have one in place, the hospital does not automatically allow you to have access to your loved one's medical information if you do not have one in place. A lot of hospitals are actually doing that when people are being admitted, but that's something that you want to keep in mind. And then finally, a living will. A living will is a living, breathing document. It allows you to change. It's like a business plan, if you can look at it that way. It allows you to make updates. You can add beneficiaries, you can add successors, you can add items, you can add to put your business into a living will, you can put homes into a living will, you can pretty much put anything that you own into a living will, and that allows you to have control and access to the property while you're still living. So that's the key thing, that these are assets that you control while you're living. You can give them away while you're living to the people that you want them to go to. So the difference between a will and a revocable trust, with a will, property is just distributed according to your wishes. You can select people or organization that will receive your property. Just to be clear, you can actually set up beneficiaries and charities to accept your property or even your business if you want to do that. You can get as creative as you want to in a will. and with a trust. You can name an executor. You can have name a guardian for your children. And again, I'm going to make that last line again. You can name a guardian for your children. If you're giving assets to a child, they need a guardian. You cannot give assets directly to a child without a guardian. They will end up in probate court and the money will not go to them directly. You also want to make sure that if you name a guardian, you tell that person, tell the guardian who that they're going to be a guardian. So you don't want surprise guardianships. And that has happened too. People go to read the estate plan and they discover that they're a guardian of someone's child, or even in some cases, dogs, business. So you want to make sure that those wishes are clearly discussed with the people that you're creating the succession plan with. With the revocable living trust, the key thing to take away from that is that it is easier to update a living trust. It is easy to have a successor trustee. It is easy to make changes without having to go through the court. It is easier to make changes without having someone recreate the entire document. You have people in place, and if this person is not available, then there's the next person and the next person and the next person. Another good thing reason for having a living trust is that you want to avoid some of the fees for probate. In Illinois, fees for probate start at $1,500. And I know we're dealing with New York, but just example, about $1,500 to $2,000 to start probate, and it can take anywhere from a year to 18 months to settle it. And to settle your affairs, and it is very, very public. It is not confidential. So the first thing that you need to do when you're creating a business succession plan is to know where all of your documents are. You need to kind of go through, make sure you have your corporate records, your filings, your registrations in order, the relationships between your other business owners, know the relationships with your employees, because your employees are part of your succession plan as well. Know where all the contracts used by the business, where's your intellectual property, because that can also go into an estate plan, your insurance, your risk management, licensing, and regulatory compliance. And here's a freebie for everybody on the call. The first thing I would encourage everybody to do when they get off this call is go to check their beneficiaries. I don't know how many times I have actually dealt with clients who have discovered that their ex or an old business partner is part of their beneficiaries that they didn't intend that to be. There's been instances where the former spouse dies and the ex-wife gets the 401k, or they might get the business account. And there's really nothing you can do about it if you have designated that person to be your successor on those documents. So check your documents, review them, make sure that they are accurate and up to date. And just like I believe Lloyd was saying, you want to make sure you do an annual review to make sure everything is up to date. One of the things that I've seen when you're doing estate planning, just a good example, a lot of people have heard about Billie Holiday. We've seen the movie. Some of you have, some of you haven't. But I want one key takeaway that kind of shocked me, and I didn't even realize it. Everybody talks about how she died with only a few dollars on her, but they failed to realize she had a legacy, and the legacy was the great music legacy that she had. That legacy actually went to her ex-husband, who was abusive. So when she died, it went to, I think his name was McKay, went to McKay. McKay got access to all of her residuals from her music. When he passed, it went on to his new wife and his new wife kids. So a lot of the legacy for Billie Holiday never even stayed within her family. So that's another reason why you need to make sure that you put a plan in place to make sure that your loved ones are taken care of, your successors are put in place, and that you are moving forward to make sure your business continues in the way that you want it to continue. Important roles. So this is where we get into making sure we have our, I think, take a quick note. Lloyd talked about your mitigation. So with your mitigation, you want to make sure that your personal team is in place, your trustees, your beneficiaries, your personal representatives, your guardian, who's going to raise your children, who's going to be responsible for them, who's going to be your personal representative, your executor. The personal representative is not necessarily your beneficiary. You also want to say who receives your property, who's going to sell your property, who's going to get your dog, who's going to take care of your dog. All of these things can go into a living trust. I would encourage you to sit down and actually start putting together some of these ideas as to where that might go. It's going to take a while. It's not an easy process, but I do encourage you to start thinking about these things now as opposed to later. Your estate planning team, your attorney, your accountant, your insurance professional, and your financial planner. Make sure that you have a clear understanding as to the roles of everyone involved in this. I do encourage you as a business owner to be actively engaged in the process. I've seen too many times where people have come to me and said, well, my attorney drew up something. I don't know what that is. You should know what each one of these team members is doing for you and doing with you so that you can hold them accountable as part of this process and your plan. Any questions, please let me know. Feel free to either reach out to me or any member of the team. Thank you. And with that, I think I'm turning it back over to Tracy or Lloyd.
Hi, everyone. It's me.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, everyone. We have a couple of questions, Wendy, and I'm wondering if you can answer these questions for Mr. Downing. He wants to know if you have an administration in your will, can your administrator handle your legacy?
Yes, but I would not put that in a will. That's more in the area of a trust. A will is just distributing your property. That's all it's doing. It's really just saying who gets what and where it goes. A trust is a more, I like them a little bit better because it's actually like a business plan, but it's a business plan for your estate. It gives you all the who, what, where's, why. It gives you more control to have things done under a trust that's not in the public eye.
Okay, he followed it up.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, Wendy.
Oh,
Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, no.
Oh, he
No,
followed it up and said he has an executor for his will to administrate his wishes. And he said that his family will have to abide by his wishes, correct?
Yes, they would. But I would recommend putting that in a trust because if it's a will, the will still has to be probated in court. And a trust, it does not. You actually just meet in the lawyer's office and they just distribute the money accordingly and then you go about your business. But when you have a will, that goes very public into the courts and all the information that's in that will gets probated, and that means it's being published. It's out there for your creditors to know, your any former business partners. All of that goes into the public eye. So I'm encouraging people to do trusts. They seem very complex, but in the long run, they are highly beneficial for anyone who's doing that. Oprah has her own trust in which she actually has someone set up to be the guardian over her dogs. That person gets paid an annual salary to take care of her dogs. I don't know what that is, but I'm thinking it's probably more than what I get paid.
All right. Well, I would encourage everyone. That brings us to the end of our presentation. We thank you all for joining us. But there are a couple of questions that I'd like to leave with you. I'm sorry. We have another question, Wendy. If I have a trust, will my executor still manage my assets?
Yes. Okay. And again, the devils are in the detail. Just like in your business plan, it's in the details and how you outline it in a trust.
Okay. All right. We'd like to just leave you. Thank you, Tracy. Thank you, Lloyd. Thank you, Wendy. We'd like to leave you with a couple of questions before we turn it back over to Harlem Community Development Corporation. And we'd like to leave you a couple of questions. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat and we'll try to answer them really quickly. If not, we'd like you to ponder on these questions. How has COVID-19 impacted you? And has there been a situation or a time where you needed a successor and you needed to plan because of either death or the fold of a partnership? And in addition, have you been impacted at work due to the lack of a succession plan? You know, we'd like you to think about those questions. Think about what's been discussed today. Think about how you can make your next move be your best move. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to either of the entities that participated in today's webinar. And with that being said, Tracy or Lloyd, do either of you have any parting comments before we turn it back over to Harlem Community Development Corporation?
I'm just going to say great job. Thank you, everybody. A great job today.
Thank you for all your questions and participation, and we're so glad that we could share this information with you.
Well, thank you. Great team. Lloyd, thank you so much for putting together such a great team. Amazing. I mean, like, good information, good stuff. I mean, a lot of people, I mean, for sure, I haven't think about the future much. I just have been focusing on the day-to-day, and then I realized that everything that I own is going to be owned by somebody else. And sooner than I probably think, who knows? And if I don't plan accordingly, who knows what would happen? So thank you everyone for joining. Thank you, team. Just want to remind everyone that you will be getting a survey. So please complete the survey. It helps us a lot to put together a program like this. Program like this come because you recommended that we did something like this. So just want to remind you that tomorrow we're going to be doing a webinar on selling in the virtual world, which is something that, God, if you're not doing that, I don't know what to say. I mean, you just got to do it. I mean, that's all I can say. You just have to be, you have to learn how to master the art of selling in the virtual world. That's the way it is. That's how things go nowadays. So as you can see in this slide, I have a lot of good stuff coming up. A week, Cinco de Mayo, May 5th, we're going to be doing bookkeeping for small businesses, and then we're going to dig into the financial statements the following week. Also, the New York City Police Department have tons of opportunities for small businesses. So we're going to be hosting the New York NYPD on a webinar on how to access those opportunities. And then we're going to do one that a lot of people ask for, and that is how to put together proposal if you're a consultant, and how to price your services. May 26th, and then we're going to do mobile marketing for your business. Again, you have to use your portable devices to market your business. And then we're going to go into Instagram and all the good stuff that we have coming up. So, but tomorrow, let's do tomorrow. So I hope to see all of you tomorrow at 10 a.m. So thank you, everyone. Curtis, any last word?
Well, I mean, I thought Lloyd was just going to come in here and bust it out solo, but no, he had to bring his A team.
That's right.
This is how Brooklyn dudes roll. This is how they do it. So so yes, you went to the Windy City and bought the content, and you know what? I can't be mad at you, man. It was excellent. Tracy, Wendy, excellent presentation. Mare, you guys rocked it, absolutely. So yes, Francisco, they will be invited back to the picnic. Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. Excellent job, guys.
Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
All right.